am your host, not Lou, but Laura. I guess you still got an L in there somewhere. And on this episode of the Motherland Fort Salem podcast, we are going to be talking about world building, a little bit of anatomy, mostly sex, but in like a productive way. You could say a reproductive way. Anyway, we hope you enjoy it, and catch you on the other side. Hey, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself and start with the introductions?
Okay. We're just gonna go around and introduce ourselves like civilized people and say what we miss the most about Lou, because she's not with us today, unfortunately.
She's still alive. She's still alive, by the way. Just want to let you guys know.
That's why I added it today. I said she's not with us today.
Sorry, I wanted to throw that in real quick.
I'm Alex, and I like how Lou is able to keep us reined in and kind of on topic.
That's great. Yes, that is a very important skill for recording a podcast. So yes, thank you, Lou. I'm Laura, and I really like about Lou many things, but I like her sense of excitement about things. The show, for example, that we're talking about today, Motherland Fort Salem, and all the intricacies of it and the dynamics of it, and the way that she gets other people to be excited about stuff too.
Hi, my name is Cloe, and I'm back, bitches. And what I really enjoy about Lou is her hair. It's like the best thing ever. When she moves, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But additionally, I'm getting thumbs up from everybody right now. Yes. But additionally, the way that she moderates and is like, okay, in a really nice way, stop talking. We need to go on to something else in a really, really nice way. And I'm like, this is great. Because it's like, you need to be quiet now, Chloe. But it's like, let's segue gently into something else with all the being like.
And on that note, let's segue smoothly without me introducing that we're segueing into our subject of today. Not subject, topic of today, which is world building. Alex,
Yes.
you've had many thoughts about this show, about this topic. So why don't you start us off with world building?
Okay, so yes, we did a couple podcast episodes ago. We mentioned, I don't even remember if it made the final cut anymore. We mentioned doing a world building episode because Elliot Lawrence has pretty much, created so much just from, I know he took a lot of inspiration from the book Witches by Erica Young, which is, I did get it. Don't buy it on Amazon. Get it on Abe Books. It's like $12. But a lot of inspiration from that. And but he basically had to create a new reality. So the world is familiar to us, probably a little bit more so to me and Chloe because we're American, and it's set in the United States. Once you introduce witches into the timeline, starting all the way back during the American Revolution, there's a lot of things that get rewritten. A major things that technology is not as advanced for them as it is for us. He said they don't really have cell phones yet. Probably haven't developed nuclear weapons. The layout of the United States is vastly different. There's a whole Chippewa cession that's all Native American land, and there's only like 40-some states, I think. I don't think they ever got around to getting Alaska.
I think they removed like Minnesota, which I just remembered was a state like 3 weeks ago, all the way down to, yes, Laura, the U.S. is so big, sometimes you forget their states are real. It took me about 30 minutes to figure out that Minnesota was a state again. But I think they took out Minnesota at the topmost of our state, all the way down to, I believe, Louisiana. Giant. Yeah.
So it looks roughly the size and shape of the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah. But for non-Americans, it's just a big old chunk going down the straight, like, line almost.
Yeah,
I kept moving my hands, but no one can see this. God.
At the beginning of every episode, during the title sequence for Motherland, Fort Salem, it shows the picture of the map of the United States. And you can see the states are all different shapes and sizes. California is like half as large. And then there's a big chunk in the middle right section that's the session. But yeah, so we knew from the beginning we needed to do a whole episode just on the world building because there's so much of it to dive into. So we have a few topics to cover. We'll just dive into those.
Alrighty. I mean, Lou does this a lot more smoothly, so
yeah.
Hey, I have this random quirky idea. Let's talk about witch anatomy. Okay, Alex, you wrote about separate vocal cords. Is there an indication in the show about that?
Well, under world building as a topic, one big thing is that witches are human adjacent. they're human mostly, but there are things that set them apart from civilians. And one of the main things is that they have a separate set of vocal cords. It's never mentioned in the show, but Elliot said it during one of those after the storm interview things, or yeah, I think it's in one of those. But yeah, they do have an entirely separate set of vocal cords, and that's how they do all of their, seed sounds and all the work. And when you think about it, it makes sense that you would need. I thought they would just be like special or something, and turned out they have a whole separate set. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about that because, or at least bring it up. Like, I think it was a good idea, really, to have a couple things that set them apart from humans. I know I brought up at one point in a previous podcast, what happens when a witch is born, because babies are born screaming and crying, wouldn't that be a problem? But now we know if they have a whole separate set of vocal cords that do work, maybe those aren't fully developed yet until later in life, and that would have been the answer to that question. So, like,
I mean, we know that the girl from the place in the desert, I don't remember anything.
The Tareem are the clan from the desert, and Kalita is the name of the little girl.
Kalita!
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah, so it's been a while since I've actually watched the show, so I don't really remember that many details. But yeah, Kalita is, how old is she?
10.
10 or so?
And she's powerful, right? So she knows.
Bad bitch.
Yeah, she knows how to use her seed.
It was suggested in the show by her brother that there's something different about her. She has like a ancient spirit, something like that, that's like specific to their people that lives in her or whatever.
Oh.
Which is, I mean, she's obviously not a normal little girl.
But she does have, like, you could assume that physically she kind of provides the right conditions for the spirit to be powerful and act through her.
Yeah, she's like the next Avatar.
Yeah. Yes. So we can assume that while they're still learning to walk and talk and that kind of thing, they're probably also, they haven't fully developed their second set of vocal cords. Do we know where they are, like, in relation to the first set of vocal cords?
They're I believe, like, right in front. In the episode, I believe it's 6, Up is Down, it's right after the Bellwether wedding, when it was supposed to look like a spree attack, but we know it was the Camarilla. They attacked the Bellwethers. So after that, when they're in the morgue with Petra and Isadora and a bunch of dead witches on the lab tables, you can also see it with Charvel, where there's lots of blood. You can see where their throats were cut open, and it's a really quick shot, but you can kind of see it's right there where your standard set of vocal cords are, and they're just kind of like on top, or maybe like right next to them, something like that. So not too different, but it's just an interesting piece of world building that I thought was kind of clever in a way to address, they do work with their voices. That's a good way of being day.
So I guess you could also, does that mean that they have kind of like magical hearing, or they have an sort of enhanced hearing for magical sounds and seeds? Yeah,
when they're learning wind shear, which is the shield, and a couple other their special weather work moves. A couple times they're said it's in the range just above human hearing, which tells you two things. It says, one, they can hear at range, high and low frequencies that humans can't hear, and two, they actually are acknowledging that they're not 100% human when they phrased it that way. When we saw all the bellwethers that were dead laid out in the morgue, and they said, yeah, all their vocal cords have been cut out. At first, you think it's a symbolic thing for the Camarilla. They're trying to destroy witches, and a big thing that makes you the witch, that makes you a witch, is your separate set of vocal cords, lets you do work. But later in the 10th episode, when they're in the desert with all the unit and Alder and the biddies, they're in the desert, and the Camarilla are attacking them, and they have those devices around their necks that are letting them do like a very perverted, twisted form of weather work. It occurred to me that the reason they took the bellwether's vocal cords could potentially have been to make those devices. And I don't know, I don't watch the After the Storm interviews, so that could have been addressed and I missed it. But my theory, so if I'm right, then I just get to be right. I didn't get that answer from anyone. My theory is that part of the reason they took all those sets of vocal cords is because they needed to make those devices that lets them do work.
So you think that they actually like transplanted the vocal cords from the witches into these machines or into these devices?
Yeah, they had the like black collar things. They had like a box right here, like a vocal box. So they transplanted it and it let them do that weird weather magic because they were all so shocked. Like, how are they doing that? And that could be the reason that they,
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, it doesn't really make that much sense because the way vocal cords work is through air. So where's the air coming from on these external vocal boxes?
It's magic.
But they're not magic.
Through the vocal cord thing, couldn't have been like, you know how sometimes vibrations, like when you're pulling taut vocal cords, could it be the vibrations stimulating the other vocal cords to kind of act in as like a projection almost?
Yeah, could be. And there could be like some kind of surgical connection between, because all we see is a box sitting there. There could be a connection or a hole somewhere for air to pass through. It was a very, very brief shot.
Yeah.
Plug your nose and sink through the box. So along the lines of separate vocal cords and witch anatomy, there is another thing that they all have a distinguishing mark on them that's kind of like your witch's mark and stuff like that. But for those that were laying on the table in the last couple of episodes, they had a really, really faint mark, whereas Abigail's mark was very prominent and stuff. So could that be a sign of how much witch's blood is in you? But the thing is, Tally had a very strong mark though, so it was kind of like, did their marks either, does it develop over time, is it like a symbol of status on how dark it is, but again, Tally, or relative to your power level? And we have never seen Rael's mark, but Scylla has, I bet. I thought that everyone had him to the same level of definition, because we see Rael, Callie, and Abigail all having the same sort of, or Rael, we don't know yet. Callie and Abigail.
On screen though. They said that they also mentioned those in that same episode with all the deceased bellwethers. With Isadora.
It's and like, and they were bellwethers, but the mark is super faint. So could it be like this prominent mark, because they were kind of, the draft is kind of like, ding, here you are, that they were like stronger? I don't know. Maybe it's like a not developed, or like wasn't awakened, or not enough DNA to like make a full voice box or something, or like not awakened. I don't know.
Isadora or Petra, I can't remember who it was, it's been a while. They said that those marks were faded because they were distant relatives of the bellwether line, children of because the bellwethers are, I would call them breeders. They selectively breed their children. So it would have been someone born outside of that selective breeding, or kids of Dodgers, people who are distant relatives, and the mark isn't as strong.
So it would be linked to power level.
Yeah, power in the blood and stuff like that.
I guess it would just be kind of like genetics. It would just keep getting less and less prominent.
Yeah.
But
only the farther away you go from the like core branches, because Abigail is like nth generation bellwether and still has a strong, vibrant mark. So it's not like it gets more faint. Like the blood's not getting diluted as it goes down in generations. It gets diluted as it goes outwards. And then with Rael's line, and that we're kind of almost getting into the next subject, which is marriage and babies.
What
and
we
breeding.
planned.
Yeah.
This is all part of the big plan.
It's all part. Yeah, we totally know what we're doing. But yeah, with the witch marks, because I am just chock full of theories. Mine is that Rael does not have one, or if she does, it is a very, very faint because her father is a civilian, which is super looked down upon to have a kid with a civilian because it dilutes the bloodlines. So we've never seen it. Obviously, it's in a special place, according to her, and that could just be a way to get people to stop asking to see it. Having a really vibrant birthmark could be maybe even seen as a status symbol, which is why Abigail's like, y'all check this out. It's nice, it's dark, it's shiny.
Shiny as hell.
Like, it's a mark that all bellwethers have, so like you don't even have to give your last name to be like, check this shit out, bam.
Yeah.
So it could be,
but like, I mean,
there to get people to stop asking. So
I do think that, I mean, Rael would have come from a line of witches, except for her mother, right? Except for when her mother married her father. Yeah,
a small, unassuming line of combat medics is what someone called them, something like that. It's been implied that her line was small and unimpressive, which doesn't mean that her witch mark wouldn't be like full or whatever word we're using for that is.
Well, because we know that she's powerful. We know that she's.
This seems to be an anomaly. Yeah, we can really only speculate at this point. So I just think it would be cool if she didn't have one, or if she had like a weird one, like if she didn't have the collar witch mark, like her mom, and her mom has a sister who is alive or dead. We don't know, but you can see it on the family tree thing. Her mom had a sister at some point. Maybe the witch mark that the collars have is not the one that Rael has. She's like, well, that's weird. Let's just not show that to anyone.
But why would you think it's not? She doesn't have the collar witch mark.
I don't. I'm like, I don't know what she has or doesn't have. Like, she is oddly powerful. We've seen that. And we have people like Kalita who play host to ancient spirits or something like that. Rael comes from the Session. Her line her official line, air quotes, only goes back a few generations, but like witches don't pop out of thin air. So her great-great-grandmother, who's the first one on that family tree in the memorial hall, like she came from someone who presumably was a witch, but wasn't maybe acknowledged by the official United States, I'm air quoting again, military witch people.
Like the census.
Yeah, the census, thank you. Wasn't so, we don't know enough about her like longer distance family history, so.
But I mean, that also could be something that could have a connection to the quote unassuming line of combat medics, because maybe they just didn't qualify, like they didn't make a blip on the radar of powerful people because they didn't want to, or because they just kept their power to themselves, or because their power was a different kind of power, because we know that she uses that pagan Christian whatever shit, quote, air quotes, but so it's like a different kind of power which wouldn't technically or maybe be acknowledged as something legitimate in this like big structure which is the military.
Right. She could potentially be descended from Native Americans. I say that very hesitantly because she is pasty white and pale blonde. She could be distantly descended from them if they had started, if perhaps they had someone from that line had suddenly shown powerful magic or lots of potential, and they said, all right, let's start marrying these people into our American military census, which society, I just kind of threw a bunch of words in there, and which kind of brought them into the fold and like lost the wherever they came from. They could have even come from another country, we just don't know yet, and kind of changed until we have the collar line as it is today, which only goes back officially 5 generations. And if Rael has maybe a witch mark that matches what her family was before they were the official collar line, that would kind of make her stand out. And she's already a girl who doesn't want to stand out.
Right.
I mean, yeah, because also Rael has blonde hair, blue eyes. That's
that's why I said distant,
It's
very
okay.
diluted.
Let's, speaking of long lines, where do babies come from? In this.
All right. Well, when two people love each other, maybe. When two people do
other.
this thing and they don't use protection.
Okay, but how did Petra Bellwether make babies?
That's true.
Baby?
Yeah, so we touched on this.
Baby.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit, I want to say, in the last podcast with Alder, because we talked about Alder and magic in the same go. We talked about it briefly, the way that breeding, air quotes, works in this world, because it was mentioned in an interview with Jess and Ashley that if you want, I think Chloe is the one who was saying it. I don't want to just like repeat everything you said word for word, but basically if you want a kid who is smart and strong and pretty, you would do that hand binding ceremony they did at the Bellwether wedding, with someone who was kind, and then again later on with someone who is smart, or whatever three qualities I just laid out. You do that with a different person that is like the personification, the epitome of that personality trait. And then when you have all the traits you want, you have you have a baby with the last person that you do your hand binding ceremony with, and you have a baby with them, and that baby will be born with all of those traits in them, which makes sense that Petra didn't have a kid until I think she's about 50 or so, which is why it makes sense for her to have a baby a little later in life, because she was getting all those personality traits together. And it also explains why Abigail was an only child.
But that does mean also, that does imply that witches, when they make babies, that there's a more direct correlation between them and their parents personality-wise? Or is it more of an intentional thing that they, through magic, somehow transfer these characteristics of the fathers, for example? So if you want somebody who's kind, then have you won't necessarily have a kind child just because you're kind, that's more about up to how you raise a child. So with witches, there must be some way of predetermining their personality to a degree.
What's that movie, Gattaca?
I love that movie.
That's what I'm thinking of, though, right? With the breeding stuff?
Yeah.
So Gattaca is this movie, and it's like a futurist. It's not the future anymore because we're past that year. But it was like a futuristic thing where parents could like have a baby, but like predetermine hair color, eye color, height, strength, weight, or that. You could also determine some of their non-physical characteristics, like making sure they don't have any diseases and things like that. And it's a controversial movie because it's like, is it real? Like, you're creating a person that is specifically these things. It's not natural or whatever. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Great movie, by the way. Go watch it. It's still good all these years later. But I think for the Bellwethers, it is very intentional. They are a very proud, old, powerful line. And on Petra's end, she's not necessarily contributing to the personality of the child. She's contributing her bloodline. And she has all these men lined up. We stand a legend. She has all these men lined up who are like, it's probably a huge honor for them, honestly, with the way that they have this matriarchal society set up. It's probably an honor for them to be part of creating the next great bellwether, who is Abigail. And that also is why she said, when they were describing the wedding, she's like, my mother, family, all my fathers. So she considers all these men her father, to an extent. We don't know what the relationship, like personal relationship, was like, but they're all considered to have helped father this child. It's just a hell of a concept. Who thinks of this stuff?
Along with that, Abigail is the way she is a lot in part because of her mother raising her and stuff like that. As you see once that she's the way that she's because of her mother, and maybe that's not because of just like her father's. If she has a lot of like dads that are super burly buff boys, and because once she gets away from burly buff boys.
But anyway, to continue.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Your thoughts.
Because once she gets out from underneath her mother's thumb and the pressure of being a bellwether, you see her become more like team-oriented and family and stuff like that, which is, again, nature, not nurture, or nurture, not nature, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess she would be more, Petra would have checked for, athleticism, magical power, and intellect, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we don't actually know. We've been talking about this the whole time, but do you give personality traits to kids in this world?
It wasn't. They didn't go super in depth on it, so you could. I think they're mostly going for like the physical stuff and intellect, and of course you get your magic from your mother, from Petra. Like the bellwether bloodline is like A+ material right there. I don't know. It's hard to say what, if any, personality traits would come from her mother or her father's. Whatever ones did, though, probably would have been overshadowed anyways by the amount of pressure that she's raised under. I know we didn't shit on Abigail in the first episode, but we were critical of her self-centeredness and stuff like that. How she's very focused on herself, and she's kind of using her unit mates, Tally and Raelle, more like stepping stones rather than teammates, things like that, and she chills out towards the end of the season. And a lot of that does come from the pressure that her mother put on her. So it's hard to say how much of that is her, how much of it is her mother, and how much of it is passed down, if that's something that you can pass down through that magic ceremony thing.
So we've talked about Abigail's almost theorizing her history extensively. So what about Tally? So, because Tally's, again, we don't ever meet a father figure with her, and we don't have any mentions of father figures. She grew up on a matrifocal farm in Sac. She grew up in Sac? That's so funny.
You gotta say what Sac is, because
Sacramento, California. I live near Sacramento, and it's like, you grew up in this. But it's just just a little bit. It's kind of hot there.
I don't think she ever met her father. She came from a matrifocal compound, and which she said no men ever. So, which is probably
everybody's gay. I said everybody's gay.
Well, clearly she's not, because
true.
That girl is not straight. We'll talk about that later, though.
Did you see the way she checked out Raelle just real quick? She was like, you look like
Raelle was like, sorry, my mark is near my vagina, and she's like, okay, but can I see it? Anyways,
let me at that.
No, she came from a matrifocal compound. No men ever. In that situation, it's like, how do kids get born? We're gonna get into the LGBT stuff later, but how do kids get born in that situation? They would have, I don't want to call it breeding season, but I'm calling it breeding season. Basically, they would have, men come. That's a terrible choice of words. They would have men visit. I'm not even sorry.
I mean, it's true.
You have to put the visual element up, because we just did this great dance. They would have men again, we're theorizing. If men would probably visit on like predetermined days or something like that, and they'd be like, all right, time to bust out some kids, and then probably they'd put maybe a little care into it, like who would be a good match. There might be a matchmaker. We just really don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
But one thing that is super, I made a note of it here on our little Google document, is there is a huge difference in breeding practices, bringing out my air quotes again, because you have it was said in some interview that Alder releasing her seed sounds as in creating weather work way back when, like how we saw it during the pageant, one of the adverse effects of that is that witches are slowly losing their fertility, and they want witches to be busting out kids quickly. Don't let your line die off. But we've seen it 3 different ways that it's kind of spiraled. You have the bellwethers. You would think bellwethers powerful line, powerful family, powerful witches. You would want them to be busting out kids left and right. However, there's tons of them. Their line isn't anywhere near close to being to dying out. So there's no urgency for them to bust out as many kids as they can. They have the privilege, basically. There's a lot of privilege in the show. Discrepancies of privilege, to be able to carefully and selectively breed essentially perfect soldiers. And then you have a line like Tally's. It's kind of a mid-tier line. The Craven line is it goes way back. Nothing particularly amazing about it, but it's been there a long time. It's put out good witches. Tally's mother had 3 or 4 sisters, I don't remember. They all died in combat. So even though they're not, they're not quite big and powerful enough to do the selective breeding, but they are important enough that they don't want that line to die out. So important that they gave 2 witches, May and Tally, dispensation, don't have to join the military in order to have more children. And then you have the collar line, which they apparently are totally fine with it dying out because, what's her name, Willa was the last one. We don't know what happened to her sister because that memorial thing didn't say if she was alive or dead. We have Willa, and then she had Raelle, and immediately got deployed again. I think they said that was her punishment for having a kid with a civilian, is that she didn't get to stay home with Raelle very much. They just kept her deployed. But now no one said anything about dispensation for Raelle. She was just like, yep, you're going to the military, and then they just put her on infantry instead of war college, which is pretty much guaranteeing that her line is going to end with her. So, yeah, so it's just there's a lot of displays of class differences and privilege in the show, and that's just one of the biggest ones. You have the bellwethers, selective breeding. No one would ever dream of letting that line, the line die out. Probably the same with the Swithes. It's implied that they're on the same level. And you have the Cravens, you don't need to selectively breed, just keep your line going. And then you have the collar line, who has only been an official line for 5 generations. They're just like, bye. It makes you wonder. Raelle's been showing these signs. Isadora saw it when they did the Link training that one day, and she put her whole class to sleep by accident. Anacostia has seen it from the beginning. Chloe had the theory that Anacostia was a knower, and we thought she was a blaster. We're not really sure what she is. But she clearly saw something in Raelle. Scylla has seen a lot of Raelle. She's seen a lot of power from Raelle, too. Sorry, I couldn't resist. She knows we don't have power. Willa, lots we don't know about Willa, but she probably knows that her daughter's unusual power is very unusual.
We don't know much about Willa.
Yeah, it's unusual for, and technically illegal, according to Elliot, for witches to learn any work at all before they go to Salem. Obviously, they learn seed sounds to a degree, and that's probably like a control thing, like so you don't accidentally sneeze and knock your house down.
Boom!
But they're not allowed to learn whatsoever any work before they go to Fort Salem. But Raelle knew a good amount. She didn't know like things that are like spells, quote unquote, like wind shear and wind strike. But she knew linking. She knew how to fix. She came to Fort Salem, and that's probably like pretty advanced. Like all the fixers that she saw in the first episode when she was doing drugs in the backwoods, and she was like, "Why didn't that kill you?" And the fixer like saw the injury on her side that she had pulled off that civilian. Like they're all very impressed. Like, how'd you do that? And she's like, I don't know, I just did. So I mean, yeah, there's signs of her being powerful. And I think my original point there was, once that starts coming to light a little bit more, like Alder takes a notice that this girl's got serious power, they might be a little less, eager and willing to let her line die.
So on that subject, that would require Raelle to reproduce. And as she stated during the Beltane episode, she's not really into the whole dude thing. She did, however, talk to, what's his name?
Iron.
About, they can just do it together, basically, and make a child and be done with it.
Yeah. They're like, neither of us happy to be here, let's do this.
It's gay beards, but it's beards, but to the extreme.
Yeah, with sex.
Yeah.
I would be very disappointed in Elliot who's a gay man, if the only method of reproduction in this world was a penis and a vagina, we're adults, I can say that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's like kind of how it's been, like that's kind of like what they've been
and that's fine if you didn't just build an entire world with magic in it and linking. Like, you telling me you can't knock somebody up through blinking? That's how the Asari do it in Mass Effect.
Especially because we have this whole thing about the way that bellwethers do it. There must be a way of like, does Petra sleep with all the fathers, or was it did it just happen during the linking ceremony?
But they're out of cycle having sex with anyone they want for 5 years. That's the thing. They can only have sex with one person, it's culturally appropriate, for those 5 years, and then they get to go back into rotation, which means go get some wherever,
Well, Charvel said that because Abigail was like, how are you going to have sex with one dude for 5 years? And she's like, you don't have to do that, let's be honest.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
I think they can have sex with whoever. It just matters who they were bonded to for those. I'm holding my own hands, visual component. For those 5 years, you have sex with that person. And sex is such a powerful tool in this show. It's not just, like, it gets the girls charged up, they feel powerful. There also could be other effects, and I feel like the transfer of personality and or physical traits probably does happen through a sexual encounter. So Petra probably did have sex with those guys.
The nasty, go get it, girl.
Right, or potentially even other women. We don't know. And like,
go get it, girl.
Who knows? But like, it doesn't have, you don't have to be scientific. Like, in our IRL, in real life, our world, we have things like where gay couples can have children biologically because of, egg implantation and sperm donors and all that kind of stuff. We don't know if they have that technology yet in this world. Like I said, they're behind technology-wise. But I mean, like, if you have things where you can, transfer traits via a hand binding ceremony and linking and things like that, I don't know. I just feel like it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that there must be other ways than penetration to make a baby, because that's
so much better.
Because I mean, generally there's this idea of, that we have it in the real world. A lot of people still define sex as man penetrates woman. Whereas, we know that sex can be way more than that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about penetration. It can be about a lot of other things. That's purely how one would naturally make children.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about
So we're not talking about sex so much as we're talking about breeding, because those are two different things, especially in this day and age when, like you just said, Laura, there's different ways to have sex. I mean,
yep.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm going to get an amen from that.
So yeah, I would be disappointed if the only way they could breed in this world was via some cisgender penetration. But, I mean, it kind of seems like that's how it is, unless Byron was just making an offhanded joke. Because it would become gross, especially from an LGBT point of view, which, again, would be very surprising coming from a gay showrunner if there's a scenario here being suggested that even if you're gay, you have to reproduce with, the biblical way or whatever, with someone else. It's kind of like a...
Unless it's kind of like a commentary on the society that they live in. I mean, you do have the fact that in this world, women are the more rare commodity, I guess you could say. Like, they are the more precious gender, in a sense, because they make the babies. And witches have to keep reproducing, because I think it's required by the government, right? Because so that they can basically keep employing witches in the military.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know if it's like required by law, because that's getting super into like a non-consensual territory. But it's very like, it's like as pressured as it can be for you to do that without it actually being a federal or state law or witch law.
But that's the thing. Like, you have this pressure in a sense to reproduce coming from the top, and it's like not a natural thing in a sense. I mean, it is, because it's
Right.
reproduction. But like the situation in which in which these children are created is not necessarily a natural one, because they're created for necessarily for the purpose of, oh, let's have a child because we love each other. Although some people, like Willa, for example, do have love children. But like with the Bellwethers, for example, you've got strategic baby making. And I do wonder, like, maybe it would be a commentary of this pressure to create children, or is it a commentary on how women are still expected to have babies in our society and are constantly told that we're going to change our minds one day once we meet the proper man? And I want to throw up every time that is said.
That one would make more sense. Even if Elliot is gay, he's still a man and might not know. That's what we hear. That's what girls or people who are assigned female at birth and were raised as girls hear that all the time. From the time they're 5 years old, first play date with a boy, and they're like, ooh, sparks are flying, I can hear the wedding bells. And I'm just like, this child isn't old enough to get the juice on its own out of the fridge, but you're already planning its wedding. Sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's actually an interesting point. Good job, Laura.
Thank you.
You have people like Raelle who, considering her background, how she grew up, might not want to have kids at all. Not just, even if she had the option of having a kid with a girl, or just, anything that didn't require penetration or whatever with a dude, if she's not into that. She might not want kids anyways, because she knows that kid would one day be drafted into the military to die, probably, and she doesn't really want to bring a kid into that world, but she might have to anyways. You'd think, she's not wealthy. She's definitely on the lower class end of the spectrum. She might think, I don't have the time or the money, to raise a kid well, and that brings up the question, would they provide? Would the military provide? The Bellwethers, Abigail was raised with the silver spoon. She had the best clothes, the best education, but that's Bellwether, that's family money. They have money. Collar family does not have that kind of wealth, so is this kid that Raelle in the future would be super pressured to have, is this kid just going to live in, not I don't want to say she lived in poverty, she just looked like she was kind of low class. Is this kid, does this kid have to settle for not a great clothing, not great education, not the best diet, you can't afford all the best, vitamins and all that stuff, are they providing for that? Could she send the kid to live at Fort Salem? Because they have kids living there. Those are fosterlings, kids whose parents are killed, presumably in combat. But, it's like, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like a parallel to the pro-life, pro-choice conversation that we have these days, or arguments, whatever, because they're like, well, we want you to have kids, don't have an abortion, have kids, it's the best thing ever. It's like, okay, well, are you paying for it? Because I can't. Yeah. What kind of support would she have? So, I don't know if they'll get that deep into it, but it would just be interesting to know.
Yeah, that's true. That would be interesting. So, LGBT representation,
which kind of ties into the whole breeding thing as well. Yep. And this it's really refreshing to see a show that is literally like, sex is great, go have but not like Euphoria, or I don't know, not like in shows that are glorifying the bad relationships.
And it's not centered around men either, it's centered around the women.
That's true.
The women are shown being encouraged to embrace their sexuality and their sexual desire. There's no slut shaming, and it's not shown as a dirty kind of carnal act. It's shown as something that is giving them energy and joy and power and things like that. And it's like, it's shown as a positive, not a negative, which is, I've never seen that before. Not for women.
But obviously with Motherland, Fort Salem, it's a lot more, it's more literal power.
Yeah.
And fertility.
Beltane.
Yeah.
Beltane is just so yay!
Yeah. So Beltane is a witch's holiday. It is the holiday of fertility and fertility and new life and all that stuff. Fertility doesn't always mean sex and babies. It can also mean like a bountiful harvest or making good money in the coming year. In this case, they're talking about power levels and also probably baby making for the non-cadets, adults who are doing that. But yeah, it was great. It was good, and it wasn't the end of Beltane, not the episode, the holiday in the show when they were showing Tally against a tree. Girl, I know that was not comfortable, but okay. And they showed Alder with Witchfather, and Abigail, 2 boys. It didn't feel gratuitous. It felt kind of like it was with it felt like it was just enough of a flow with the show that it wasn't just like, here's a sex scene, but 3 of them all at once. And I liked that Alder and Witchfather, they're not romantic in the least. There was purely almost a business arrangement. I like that they're friends and that they have a lot of respect for each other, and then they also do that. It was really weird with all the biddies standing around, but it was good. I liked the amount of respect they had for it. It was weird, okay, it was. They were standing there like this, and just, it's fine.
Well, that's because it was a sort of a sacred act.
Yeah, and they're connected to her, so I'm sure they all felt that too. But anyways, I liked the amount of respect and it didn't just all feel like a bunch of gratuitous sex all thrown at us at once. Plus, there was enough of a build up to it that if you just really didn't want to see, you could just fast forward.
Yeah, but okay, so let's get to gay sex.
Hell yeah, let's do it. We'll just stop the recording now. Oh, you're talking about in the show?
No,
okay.
Not like that. Does that kind of sex also create power?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And is that addressed in the show?
Pretty much, because her and Raelle and Scylla had their get to know you session in Scylla's room.
Get to know you session. Oh my god.
Yeah, they were getting better acquainted, and the next day Raelle busted out that seed sound that Anacostia was like, "Oh, that's hard to do. Good job." And that could be partially because Raelle just is like that. She just be like that. She's powerful, more powerful than most, but she very well could have gotten charged up from Scylla.
True.
And Tally did ask her. Well, she might not have known that Raelle was gay yet, but it's assumed that
did
Raelle.
you look at her though? Did you see?
Yeah, she didn't walk in there like a straight person. You're correct.
Did you see her waltz in?
Never seen a straight girl dressed like that. All that flannel, gay.
And the jacket. It's just she's got the look. She's got the look.
She does a bit.
But anyways, like we just said, sex is sex. There's different kinds of it, and also at the end of the reel on Beltane, there were guys that went off with guys and girls went off with girls. Glory, absolute legend, left the dance floor with 2 girls. 2. And
Good
I'm
for
like,
her.
you can see her in the background when Byron and Raelle are leaving the dance floor. The 3 girls you can see in the background right behind them, that's Glory and 2 other girls. So if they're leaving together on Beltane, you got to imagine that whatever they're going to do, however they get to know each other later, is going to give them the same kind of charge that being with a penis wielder would give them.
A penis wielder?
It's like a class in Dungeons and Dragons.
I don't want to say men, because not all men have a penis. And
yeah, no, that's
true. You know what I'm saying? And Elliot has said that in the coming seasons he wants to introduce transgender, even non-binary witches. So again, the whole sex binary thing is going to be flipped because so I wanted to say that, but they would get the same. Those 2 boys that were with Abigail were hooking up with each other too, so.
And it wasn't like ew, you want to hook up with.
Yeah, it wasn't gross. It wasn't fetishizing gay men at all, which was great. It was just kind of like, again, they were friends. Is Beltane is a respectful thing. Like, sure, let's do this. And there's lots of really casual LGBT rep as well. You have your main protagonist, Raelle, says twice, 2 different times, I'm not into guys. I like girls. I'm a big old lesbian. Well, she's little. She's like 5'4" four.
A little all lesbian.
No, so we have Raelle, and then we have Scylla, who, for all we know, we don't know if she's like pansexual, bisexual. She's had a boyfriend. She's well, I mean, she could be pansexual as well, or
right, dude.
So you have your gay protagonist, and you have Scylla, who's not straight, and she's not she's not a lesbian. She did date Porter, but she's not straight, which is the point. You have your main couple is two women, which is great. But you also have lots of casual representation, which I really like, because usually a show will just have their token gay couple and call it a day. But no, at the wedding, you can see some dudes dancing with each other on the dance floor right behind Raelle and Scylla. At Beltane, my God, there's just gay stuff happening all over the place. Again, I would like to bring up that Glory left with 2 girls. I'm so proud of her. But that's not too shocking. She came from the same matrifocal compound that Tally came from. All she knows is girls, and
Sacramento's gay.
Exactly. She's kind of a mouse. Like, she's not, she's kind of a mouse. She's very nervous. She doesn't, she feels really out of place at Fort Salem. She's probably not trying to get too far out of her comfort zone. So her going and meeting a bunch of guys is probably not on her to-do list. She probably felt more comfortable meeting some girls, and it just makes sense for her not to be straight. Why would she? Why would she be? She's never met a man. She's not missing anything. But
well, I mean, Tally, as we've established, Tally grew up on the same matrifocal compound and is still into men.
Yeah, she's into men. She doesn't have to be. She might not exclusively be into them. You can't tell me she did some experimenting before she went to Fort Salem.
Tally's never had sex before.
Experimenting does not mean sex.
Oh, very true.
There's messing around.
Tally is a very, innocent type of person who gets excited
about it. She comes off that way. She does come off that way, but she
does have a kind of a bisexual vibe, I have to say. Like, she's got like...
She does. She has a kind of a innocent, naive, virgin vibe going on, but that could just be exclusively related to men. Like, she's never met a guy before, but she's heard about them probably, and she was really excited, and they're coming to Fort Salem. She was like, I'm excited about this. That doesn't mean that she's never like experimented with a girl or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and that being said, she did, meet a guy for the first time and then have sex with him that night, pretty much.
I think it was like a couple days later, because they met in episode 3, and then there was like a few days or something of festivities before actual Beltane, but then against a tree, like that's on him, because he's done it before. He knows that wouldn't be comfortable, so that's the first red flag.
Anyway, let's move on from that subject a little bit.
I did like, actually, that they showed... I don't really care usually about straight people ships, because you can see those anywhere. I did like the one between Tally and Garrett, not because it was a good relationship, but because it was a good depiction of a first relationship, where you meet someone and you like them and it feels like love immediately. At the wedding, they were saying their I love yous, and I think they knew each other for about 6 days. And me, I'm old and jaded at the ripe old age of 27, and I was like, oh sweet, that's not love, that's like lust or infatuation. And it was, but she thought it was love. She felt like it was love, and it's not cool to shit on someone like that. But yeah, and then it turned out that the relationship wasn't super healthy, because he didn't tell her about this other girl, and then he kind of basically tricked her, tried to trick her into having a threesome, and she was not having that. So it did provide good growth for Tally and show a lot of people. I don't know how many like young people watch this show, but like, your first love does not have to last. Doesn't mean it was less important, but like,
it also shows people about consent and the fact that he did not consent to this. And although he may not seem like a terrible person at first, which like I'm not saying he is, but like he did not ask for her consent before agreeing, kind of getting her into this situation of a potential
planning. Yeah, and I think he said, I think Hillary was in on it as well, or whatever, or she just rolled with it. But yeah, so it teaches a consent, but it also shows a Tally. I loved seeing that they showed Tally saying no and leaving. Like, She said, showing a girl who recognizes she deserves better than that, she didn't consent, taking control of it and leaving the situation. You never see that. Like, if it was another show, she would have been like, I mean, maybe, I don't know, I'll talk to you later, and then like coming back to him later and being like, no, I know you didn't mean that, it was fine, just we'll maybe work up to that. And she was like, nope, you don't get me at all, you didn't ask about this, I'm done. And she was out, and I was so proud of her.
So for our final subject, we wanted to talk about sigils and seeds.
All right, so in the show, Motherland, Fort Salem, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, they have two main forms of doing magic, or work as they call it. They have seed sounds, which they make with their throat, separate vocal cords, we already discussed those, and they also can, the second form is with making sigils with their, I think everyone does it with their thumb, Rael does it with her pinky, it doesn't seem to matter, you just, with your finger, you trace a sign, and that's what a sigil is. They just seem to be two ways of doing magic, but they have very different effects. So with their seed sounds, they have things, that's where they do all the weather work, that's how they do wind strike and wind shear, the cold one, I don't remember what that's called, wind chill, and that's how they do those. That's how Scylla grew that death cap out of the dead bird. It's how they get, different effects to happen on like that big grand scale. And we see that all the time. And then a few times during the show, we saw the use of sigils, which seem to have much smaller, more precise applications. The two that we saw, I think we've only seen like two. The one we've seen the most is for locking and unlocking, is that little, Tally used it to lock her door in the first episode when her mom was trying to convince her not to leave. We saw Scylla attempt to do it in the Necro Labs when she was trying to sabotage Porta's body because she hadn't done enough to that boy by then. It didn't work. Presumably there's a more powerful magic or seal or whatever on that door trying to keep unauthorized people out, so her sigil didn't work. And we saw in the 6th episode, right after the Bellwether wedding attack, Petra was trying to identify that screeching sound that she had heard the Knot Spree, the Camarilla, use. And those women had brought her those boxes that contained the different types of seeds that would sound similar, and they had to unlock those with that same sigil. So we've seen that sigil, and the other one we've seen is the one that Willa Collar signs all of her letters with to Rael, and Rael traces over them. And at first, when I first saw her do it, I thought it was just like a nostalgic thing, like that was her mom's way of signing it, and she was just tracing it for nostalgia. And then it was just a cinematic effect to let us see Willa saying the things and showing us what was going on.
Same.
Later, it wasn't until later that I realized, and again, it might have been acknowledged in an interview that I missed. Later, I realized that it was actually, she actually was seeing that when she traced. So it's called a memory sigil that Willa uses. We've only seen her do it. She signs her letters to Rael with them, so that when Rael traces the sigil, she actually can see her mother, what she was doing when she wrote this, and hear her voice. So to me, that kind of feels like a powerful ass sigil, because holy shit, you just like astral projected yourself into that person from a piece of paper. So sigils have definitely more condensed specific uses as opposed to seed sounds.
I guess you could say that it's kind of like a symbol that's instilled or infused with intention, and that can create a very specific situation. So I guess you could say that with the letters, for example, she's unlocking a memory or unlocking a message, sort of like opening a message through a sigil. But I guess they don't really teach sigils though, right? They teach the seeds.
They might teach them in War College. That might be a class, because we've only seen basic training so far. Yeah, we've only seen basic training so far, and that I know we said that it was against the law for witches to learn magic before going to Fort Salem, but the sigils seem to be very commonplace, so that might be something they are permitted to learn, maybe a couple of them, like the locking and unlocking one, like that's the only thing that sigil can do. So there's not really any harm in teaching someone that sigil, how to lock and unlock something. Whereas teaching someone a seed sound they're not ready for, that's a good way to knocking a house down or putting a hole in the ground, something like that. It could be like a whole class on sigils and runes and stuff like that. That would be kind of cool. We're going to get into that a lot more, according to Elliot, since Alder was, pulled the stick out of her ass and let them go to war college. And there's also going to be a whole class on mother tongue. The girls get to learn that, and I'm really looking forward. That's going to be super cool. Elliot mentioned the thing about mother tongue, because it was one of the questions, is actually the first language in his world that he's created. It's the first language ever. Way, way long ass time ago, witches invented speaking, and that was the language they spoke, and they taught regular humans how to speak. And then over the years, you had the Tower of Babel situation where languages split off and changed, and now you have the languages we have today. But in his world, in the world of Motherland, Fort Salem, mother tongue was the OG language, that witches knew and created and taught to everyone else, and now they're going to, the girls, our unit, are going to be learning that in war college, as well as all kinds of other stuff.
So does this mean that since all languages kind of come from this language, does this mean that all words are magic to a degree?
Ooh.
Well, they don't use words for magic, they use sounds. Rael uses words, but and even if they were magic, it wouldn't matter if you didn't have the right vocal cords to get the magic off, so maybe.
Well, that's not very historically accurate, but okay.
Laura the linguist.
It is for this world. Nothing is historically accurate because they ended the revolution in a single night.
I was going to say an outro. What's one skill that you kind of want to try, like a new hobby that you want to try?
I recently started learning Spanish on Duolingo. I started.
Oh, same. Me too.
Oh, wait, nice. I started a week and a half ago, and enjoying it a lot. So Duolingo, it's great.
I kind of already do this, but I do need to or want to practice the ukulele more because I just don't do it enough. I did it daily for a while and then I stopped for a bit, and it's really fun. So Chloe, you haven't said your skill yet.
Oh, my skill? I have to do it for school, but I'm learning how to do coding on a program called R, which is a scientific. It's kind of, we use it a lot for data analysis and stuff, and creating different systems to filter through large sets and large scales of data, which is really cool.
Nice.
So that was our episode on Motherland, Fort Salem, Worldbuilding, and we shall see you next time. Bye!